I wrote 200 films before sound came in.
Hello all and welcome to Women Behind the Camera Class 9, costumers, hairdressers, and makeup artists. Since your reading for this week from the book Edith Head's Hollywood was hopefully already, something that gave you an idea or two about the importance and impact of filmic wardrobe, not only within a given film, but also on the wider culture in the real world, as seen through the lens of the single most famous costume designer in film history, Edith Head herself, why don't we make that the theme of tonight's attendance assignment? Email me right now with one thing that stood out to you from the reading. It could be anything, just prove to me that you read or admit that you didn't, with the understanding, as always, that those who admit that they didn't read will lose fewer points than those who try to trick me and fail. As always, those who actually did do the reading will get full credit and are generally easy to distinguish. So pause the video and email me with one thing that you learned or that stood out to you from the reading right now. Okay, you did it? Good job. Now, I wanted to comment briefly on the results of your last pop quiz before we delve into tonight's discussion, particularly the one question that asked you to comment on the following widely held belief. The further back in time you go, the worse women had it in the film industry and in the wider culture. That was the question. Now, the reason why I put this on the pop quiz is because in most of my classes, I usually have a question almost exactly like this on both the midterm and the final exam, and remarkably in every class that I have taught so far, at least one person always gets it wrong, even on the final, despite being corrected on it the first time around. Since we had a midterm project in this class and not a midterm exam, I decided to put this question on the pop quiz to sort of serve the same purpose as a warm-up to the final. So in case you didn't get it, newsflash, this question will be on the final exam, and when you answer it, I really want you to think about it, to use your brain, and question the lazy default narratives that you were fed growing up that say that progress is guaranteed and things are better now than they ever were in the past, because in a lot of respects, this is very obviously a false narrative, and it's important to keep that in mind. Now, to be fair, many of you got this question right. Good for you. And I was very happy with some of the responses, to the point at which I actually gave some people extra credit. But, as I expected, some people got this question very wrong, despite all that we've been learning this semester. So let's just go over it again. Like I said, it will be appearing in some form on the final exam, so it's important to know this. Now, once again, the question was, comment on the following widely held belief. The further back in time you go, the worse women had it in the film industry and in the wider culture. Now, hopefully, the obvious takeaway is that this statement is false.
False.
For those of you who agreed with it, get with the program! It's false! This is a false narrative, and in the case of this quiz, I gave full credit to anyone who was even remotely aware of this. Even if all you did was point out that it was partially false, I gave you partial credit, even though I will be grading this more harshly on the final and won't be giving partial credit like that. Well, I mean maybe. Depends on how many points I allot to that question. But I certainly won't be giving you full credit if you partially agree with this. Basically, the reason is because, as to my line of thinking, the entire statement is in actual fact completely false, and here's why. Number one, as you hopefully know, we know for a fact that at the dawn of film and for the first 25 or so years of its existence, women had it way better in basically every existing capacity, every existing film industry profession than they have ever had it since, even including the present day. And two, to say that the further back in time you go, the worse women had it in the wider culture is also clearly incorrect, as some of you very cogently pointed out in your responses, because this would imply that, for instance, women in the 1940s had it worse than women in the 1950s, which is obviously not the case. That's quite the opposite of the truth, being that in the 1940s, women were allowed to occupy every existing job, from military pilot to corporate CEO to heavy lifting factory worker to Major League Baseball player, in much greater numbers than have ever been seen since, and the 1950s was the decade when all of this progress was institutionally erased and undone and reversed through government-sponsored PR campaigns bombarding people with the message that a woman's place was in the home. And yet, the 1950s happened after the 1940s, didn't they? There you go. Thus disproving the idea that the further back in time you go, the worse women had it in the larger culture. And that, of course, is to say nothing of the fact that, of course, going even further back, say about 10,000 years back, to a pre-agricultural world, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that women actually had it even better than they do today, that, women had much more equal status for the first, 190,000 some years of human existence prior to the advent of agriculture.
Primalism!
So what's the takeaway here, right? The takeaway that some of you got, and that I hope the rest of you will get on the final, is this. Progress has very little to do with chronological time, period. It has a lot more to do with cultural movements, which tend to come in waves. They invite backswings and backlashes, and like the stock market or a pendulum, go up and down and back and forth. These things change with time. We'd all like to believe that the further into the future we go, the better we will have it, but this simply is not the case. I think even a cursory glance at current events here in the year 2020 will swiftly reveal this to be a very obviously and wildly false narrative. It looks to me rather as though a much better narrative is to state that, for example, when new technologies for mass communication get invented, whether it's film, the printing press, or the internet, or what have you, women and minorities seem to have a brief moment at the beginning in which this technology is new, in which they utilize these new technologies towards making huge leaps and bounds of social progress through, widely circulated mass media, often with the social message of equality among people and the recognition of our shared humanity across a spectrum of diversity. However, when the power of these new mass media communication technologies is fully understood and co-opted by more conservative forces, usually the forces that are already in power and wish to maintain their power and hence the status quo, we've seen a series of epic cultural backswings, whether it's the soft purging of women out of the film industry circa 1920, or the harnessing of the internet to spread lies, conspiracy theories, and disinformation campaigns towards the empowerment of perhaps the most toxically conservative and imbalanced form of government the United States has ever seen. We're seeing a clear pattern of stifled progress here, of stifled potential for cultural growth. Whether it's the growing gender equality of the late 1910s as spearheaded by female filmmakers being suddenly trampled by the soft purge the very same year that women got the right to vote when this social progress was just beginning to bloom, or whether it's the capacity of the internet to spread, firsthand stories of LGBTQ plus people of color, sexual assault survivors, women, and others into the mainstream, getting us closer than ever before in human civilization to really understanding each other's shared humanity and solve the problems that our culture perpetuates. And the dark backswing from that progress that we are currently seeing take place and unfold all around us right now. This discussion brings me to the famous quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that states, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." In an opinion piece for the Huffington Post from 2018, Michael Denzel Smith writes, "The use of the quotation, though, carries the risk of magical thinking. After all, if the arc of the moral universe will inevitably bend toward justice, then there is no reason for us to work toward that justice, as it is preordained. If it is only a matter of cosmic influence, if there is no human role, then we are off the hook. This isn't how King meant it," as evidenced by the work to which he dedicated his own life. The quote then goes on to state, in a 2016 interview with CBS, former Attorney General Eric Holder cautioned that the arc bends towards justice, but it only bends toward justice because people pull it toward justice. It doesn't happen on its own. That's the end of the quote. And this ultimately is the reason why we should reject statements like the one that I gave you on the last pop quiz. The idea that forward social progress is in any way related to forward-moving chronological time is utter nonsense. It's basically just a lie that people like to tell themselves so as to feel better about the circumstances in which they live. We have no ability to go back in time, we can only go slowly forward, and therefore deluding ourselves into thinking that moving slowly forward means getting ever and ever better is a pleasant thought, but a delusion. I'm sorry if you were taught that, women just have it better and better year by year, day by day, the further forward into time that we go. This is a lie. This simply isn't true. Sorry if you were taught this. This is not to say that we haven't made any cultural progress for gender equality since, say, the 1950s. Certainly that is true, definitely. But we've actually gone backward in terms of women's involvement in the labor force since the 1940s, not to mention major league sports, upper corporate management, and basically every job that commands status. Remember, it's all about status and power. It's jobs that have status and power that tend to make, the people in charge in our world, men, because of patriarchy, think, oh, this is for me and not for you. So yeah, it's all about status. So in short, I want those of you who got this question wrong or who even said it was partially correct to seriously consider these issues, to think about it, and to understand that we could have potentially achieved much greater gender equality than we currently have way back in the 1920s, or again in the 1940s, had there not been a conservative backswing by those in power that pushed all the women out of Hollywood, or a conservative backswing by those in power that pushed women out of the larger workforce, the labor force of the 40s, and of course circulated PR campaigns telling people that women, shouldn't be working. Or honestly, way back before the dawn of human civilization, had the advent of agriculture been gone about a little differently. Long story short, don't get this question wrong on the final. I won't be giving you credit for agreeing with it even partially when it's on the final exam. Do you understand? Not even partially, unless you can make a very good argument that addresses all of the points that I've just made here and brings something new to the table. If you really think, then maybe I will consider it. But in general, just be wary of this. Anyway, now that we've covered that, let's talk about what we came here to talk about, female costumers, hairdressers, and makeup artists throughout film history. So to start with, as your reading alluded to briefly, these professions did not really exist in and of themselves right from the get-go at the dawn of cinema. As hopefully you learned from Edith Head's Hollywood, actors and actresses in the early silent era were expected to do their own hair and makeup and provide their own wardrobe, and were hence often cast for what clothes they showed up wearing and how they presented themselves in their audition. As a result, as your reading for this week pointed out, successful ladies of the night, prostitutes, often got screen roles in the early days because of the fact that they typically had good wardrobe and were able to present themselves attractively with hair and makeup and whatnot, transitioning from the bedroom to the silver screen, as it were. Keep in mind, too, that the silent era also did have porn films. This goes all the way back. So there was another channel through which this transition could have been made into legitimate Hollywood filmmaking as well. But that's not the only influence that practitioners of the oldest profession had on early Hollywood. There's a fascinating story about George Westmore, the father of Bud Westmore, who is the guy who, as you will be reading for next week, unceremoniously fired pioneering female special effects artist Millicent Patrick from Universal for no clear reason. But anyway, his father, there's a part about him that I would like to read to you now from the book The Lady from the Black Lagoon, which is the book that you will be reading, though a different part of it, for next week. It reads, "It all began with George Westmore, Bud's father. He was a British hairdresser who immigrated to the United States in the early 1900s. He traveled around the country hairdressing for a while before settling in Los Angeles in 1917. George was a savvy man. He talked his way onto the set of a film being made by Selig Polyscope Company, convincing the director that they needed someone on set to do hair and makeup. It was a bold move, but he was right. The director saw his logic and George was hired on the spot. He established Hollywood's first hair and makeup department. Selig Polyscope ceased making movies the next year in 1918, but George was already on his way to making his mark on the world of film. George started working freelance after Selig Polyscope closed shop and soon developed a reputation for his high-quality work. This was a time when there wasn't a designated person on set to do makeup. It seems like an obvious thing to need, but Hollywood was still transitioning from silent films when the stars were usually responsible for doing their own makeup. Besides being a lot of extra work for the actor, the problem was that without someone to quality control it, the makeup often looked slightly different from shot to shot or scene to scene. Having a makeup artist on set made a huge difference in the continuity and quality of the film. He was great with makeup, but George was a wizard with wigs. He's famous for designing and creating Shirley Temple's curls, which George originally made for a producer and an actress named Mary Pickford, who we learned about from the Frances Marion film. She isn't known by modern audiences, but in her day, the 1910s to 20s, Mary Pickford was one of the most famous actresses and producers in the country. We know about her. She was one of the founders of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and received the second ever Best Actress Oscar, that is, in 1929. Mary's hair was very fine, and like nearly everyone in the world, she wanted the opposite of what her hair's natural tendency was. The fat sausage curls George created for her to pin into her real hair became her trademark, and ultimately Shirley Temple's years later when Shirley imitated the look. Neither Mary nor Shirley ever knew that the curls George originally created came from hair that he purchased from the sex workers who staffed a sexual enterprise called Big Susie's French Whorehouse. The women supplying the hair to George never knew he was charging Mary $50 a curl, the equivalent of about $650 today. Hollywood doesn't just owe hair innovations to the women of Big Susie's. George would practice makeup on the sex workers there too. The women got made up expertly for free, and George got lots of beautiful faces to experiment on. The entire world of makeup and hair artistry can thank the women of Big Susie's.
Not sure how I feel about Shirley Temple's hair being from a prostitute.
There you have that. You can apparently thank sex workers, the sex workers of Big Susie's French Whorehouse, for Mary Pickford's famous curls and Shirley Temple's adorable hair extensions, not to mention for basically being the guinea pigs on whom the styles that would later define classical Hollywood makeup, were originally tested on. I kind of wonder if George Westmore ever did any empiricism with this, if he, asked the prostitutes whose makeup he had done whether they got more customers if he did a certain thing with the eyebrows or the lipstick or what have you, and whether or not this shaped, later styles, for legitimate actresses to wear based on the data that he collected. Perhaps we'll never know. But we do know that the use of casual makeup for real-life women who were not prostitutes did not become popular in American culture until the 1920s, around when George Westmore got big on the scene, and clearly due to the influence of film, that's really why makeup for women in daily life got to be a thing. Basically, the fact that glamorous silent film stars often endorsed makeup products in early fan magazines like Photoplay, thus creating a culture that encouraged women to wear makeup in their daily lives, which had not been a thing before. Prior to this cultural shift in the 1920s, it was commonly seen as vulgar for American women to wear noticeable amounts of makeup in public, as it gave the suggestion that the wearer was a prostitute. The heavy makeup styles of Hollywood studio film in the 1920s changed this perception, however, clearly because of the influence of actual prostitutes, both behind the scenes and occasionally in front of the camera itself, basically normalizing this look, and it's a phenomenon that most people don't generally recognize or know about. So ultimately, the culture that sells makeup products to women even today is founded in the early history of the influence of female prostitutes on silent film in the early days of studio Hollywood. Anyway, as you can see, it wasn't really until after the Soft Purge that having a separate person or department of people in charge of wardrobe, hair, and makeup really emerged as a standard concept of Hollywood filmmaking, apparently largely thanks to George Westmore and the Ladies of the Night, which would actually be a pretty good name for a band. Anyway, as such, as you can probably guess, this wasn't a job that women behind the camera were in charge of in large numbers until much later on, as there was no big hidden history of female costumers, hairdressers, and makeup artists who weren't already in front of the camera themselves prior to the emergence of the Big Five Hollywood studios that pushed women out of so many roles behind the camera. So, you know, there's no, like, erased history of female costumers, hairdressers, etc., because that wasn't a profession prior to the Soft Purge. So in this way, it's not technically correct, though, to say that there were no female costumers, makeup artists, hairdressers, etc., that is, prior to 1920. It's just the case that most of these women were actresses providing their own makeup, hair, and costuming, and generally in front of the camera rather than behind it. Of course, there were many women who occupied both roles, acting and also directing, or writing, or producing, or what have you. And in cases of that nature, what with people like Alice Guy Blaché, Lois Weber, Mabel Normand, Marion Wong, and all the other female silent film auteurs whom we have studied, you know, people who were also acting in their own films, these women would have also been doing their own hair, makeup, costuming, etc., and of course they should be credited for that as well. In short, in general, if it's a film before 1920, and honestly, in many cases, even afterward, the actors were almost definitely doing their own makeup, and if there's a makeup that you particularly like in a given silent film, typically you can credit the actor or actress on screen with having created it themselves. For instance, you know, Lon Chaney, famously known as the Man of a Thousand Faces, continued doing his own makeup into the early 1930s. So understand the idea of a hair and makeup artist as something that gradually evolved out of the decade of the 1920s and was more likely to exist on a given film the further into the decade that it was made and the higher the budget of the production. Now, before we get too involved with the evolution of hair and makeup, let's take things one at a time and start with a focus on female costume designers. That's right! Costume designers. So a costume designer is, of course, the person who designs the costumes for a film. Costume designers, as you learned from the reading, often employ a team of sketch artists, drapers, and other such wardrobe professionals to help bring their designs to life. So, like everything in the film industry, it's yet another huge team effort, often involving the work of a whole department of people. The field of filmic costume design seems to have emerged a little differently from that of hair and makeup, though, coming from more out of the traditions of live theater at the time rather than the fashions of prostitutes, and originally involved an interesting combination between, one, clothes belonging to the actors from their own personal wardrobes, and two, theatrical costumes borrowed from stage show rental companies for, like, you know, live theater, and three, the casual fabrication, borrowing, and sharing of clothing from various different people behind the scenes, as can be seen through this quote from Setting the Scene, A Short History of Hollywood Costume Design, 1912 to 2012, by Deborah N. Landis. The quote reads, "Film lore has it that a number of the costumes for The Birth of a Nation were made by actress Lillian Gish's mother, a source that could be considered a hybrid of past and future costuming processes. Indeed, the comments about Griffith's auditioning practices made by his wife, Linda Arvidsson, have often been quoted. 'I have no part for you, Miss Hart, but I can use your hat. I'll give you $5 if you will let Miss Pickford wear your hat for this picture.' Griffith chose a more structured path, however, in costuming his 1916 drama Intolerance, Love's Struggles Through the Ages, which we screened a clip of in a previous class meeting, considered the first Hollywood film in which costumes were created for lead players and extras alike." And that's the end of the quote. This same article then goes on to explain how before the film industry's move from the East Coast to Hollywood was complete, films shot in New York and New Jersey had the advantage of hiring haute couture New York fashion designers to create costumes for their films if desired, and it wasn't really until around 1918 that costume designers started getting in as a part of the staff for a given film production in Hollywood. So one of the first costume designers of either gender hired in this capacity was Claire West, whose career took off in the late 1910s and burned brightly but quickly doing work for Cecil B. DeMille and D.W. Griffith, but was over by the end of 1925 for reasons I was not able to uncover in my research. But considering the soft purge and the fact that she left the film industry only 5 years after it began, together with the fact that, according to Wikipedia, a 1930 census listed her as a department store dress designer and living in a boarding house, and that's the end of the quote, indicating that she was in not the best financial shape there. And by the mid-1920s, of course, most of the, prominent costume designers in Hollywood were by that time men. All these things considered, it would appear that the decline in her career resembles that of other women behind the camera in various capacities from the same time period, and until better information becomes available, I feel it's reasonable to speculate that she may have been one of the victims of either the soft purge itself or of the fallout surrounding it and the related domino effect of women's disempowerment and replacement by men throughout early Hollywood. As you read in Edith Head's Hollywood, costume designers in the studio Hollywood era were predominantly male throughout the entire classical period, and Edith Head was, of course, one of the few standout exceptions. I find it interesting that, according to her own recollections, Edith Head was not seen as a threat by either of her male mentors, Howard Greer or Travis Banton, who seem to have actually been extremely supportive of her and her career, grooming her from a complete novice with no knowledge of the business into the person who would ultimately replace them in their work and become the most famous costume designer in all of international cinematic history. It's interesting how this story encapsulates a rare sort of opposite narrative to what we've been learning about men in the film industry thus far. Instead of feeling threatened by Edith Head or working to push her out of the business, Travis Banton and Howard Greer seem to have been genuinely supportive, encouraging mentors who helped Edith Head spread her creative wings and realize her true potential as a designer. Looking at this story as a microcosm for what Hollywood could have been like had it not been for the misplaced toxic patriarchal hierarchy that has defined the film industry for most of the past century, we catch a glimpse of the potential that we have likely lost along the way. If Edith Head, a total nobody with no relevant practical knowledge and no experience whatsoever pertaining to the filmic role that she chose, could just walk in with a collection of art from other people's portfolios, get on-the-job training, and end up as the most celebrated costume designer in international film history, kind of makes you wonder what other contributions women could have made, especially women who were actually trained and educated for the roles that they chose, had more men in Hollywood been as encouraging and as, non-threatened as Howard Greer and Travis Banton. By the way, in case you weren't already aware, Edith Head is perhaps more famous to the current generation of film viewers as the inspiration for the Pixar character from The Incredibles, Edna Mode. Edna Mode is, of course, a 3D cartoon caricature of Edith Head, having a similar job, a very similar look, being obviously famously short, dark-haired with very, crisp lines to her haircut, and with the classic round Coke bottle glasses, the dismissive attitude, and all of the quirks of the colorful character that Edith Head was famous for being. To demonstrate this, let's take a brief look at a clip of Edna Mode from 2004's The Incredibles right now.
You have an appointment?
I'm an old friend. I just wanted
All visitors are required to make
Get
a
the back room.
arrangement.
Go check the electric fence or something. What is it? Who are you? What do you want? My God, you've gotten fat. Come in, come. things are going quite well, my God, no complaints. But, you know, it is not the same at all.
Weren't you just in the news? Some show in Prague?
Milan, darling, Milan. Super models. Nothing super about them, spoiled, stupid little stick figures with poofy lips who think only about themselves. I used to design for gods. But perhaps you'll come with a challenge, eh? I was surprised to get your call.
I just need a patch job.
This is Mega Mesh, outmoded but very sturdy, and you've torn right through it. What have you been doing, Robert? Moonlighting hero work?
Must have happened a long time ago.
I see. This is a hobo suit, darling. Now you can't be seen in this. I won't allow it. 15 years ago, maybe, but now...
What do you mean? You designed it.
I never look back, darling. It distracts from the now. You need a new suit. That much is certain.
A new suit? Oh, where the heck am I gonna get a new
You
suit?
can't! It's impossible! I'm far too busy, so ask me now before I again become sane.
Wait, you want to make me a suit?
You push too hard, darling, but I accept. It will be bold, dramatic,
Yeah.
heroic.
Yeah, something classic, like Dynaguy. Oh, he had a great look. Oh, the cape and the boots.
No capes.
Isn't that my decision?
Do you remember Thunderhead? Tall, storm powers. Nice man, good with kids.
Listen.
November 15th of 58. All was well, another day saved, when his cape snagged on a missile.
Thunderhead was not the brightest bulb.
Stratogale, April 23rd, 57. Cape caught in a jet turbine.
You can't generalize about this.
Metaman, express elevator. Dynaguy, snag on takeoff. Splashdown, sucked into a vortex. No capes. No, go on. Your new suit will be finished before your next assignment.
You know I'm retired from hero work.
As am I, Robert. Yet here we are.
I only need a patch job for sentimental reasons.
Fine. I will also fix the hobo suit.
You're the best of the best,
Yes, I know, darling. I know.
Now, considering that the acts of hairdressing, sewing clothes, and doing makeup are all things that are typically understood as the, stereotypical domain of women in the real world, you would think that there therefore would have been lots of women in the professions, of costuming, hairdressing, and makeup art right from the get-go. You'd think that as soon as these occupations became a standard expectation in Hollywood film production, that these jobs would have just been immediately flooded by women, right? And of course, this was not the case. As we discussed in previous classes, when it comes to occupations that have the potential for great status and power, even if these are occupations generally thought of as being feminine or within female domains, once power is involved, you find all of a sudden that these jobs are almost entirely occupied by men, with things like, female cooks but male professional chefs, female seamstresses but male tailors, or for our purpose, costume designers, and of course women who do hair and makeup but male hairdressers and makeup artists. Perhaps this helps explain the predominance of men in these high-status, important-looking roles throughout classical Hollywood, but the prevalence of women on the sidelines in these professions. Perhaps you may have picked up on this in the reading, how often Edith Head used the term wardrobe girl to describe one of the many employees tasked with miscellaneous duties like transporting costumes, dressing the stars, and putting the finishing touches onto the final costume itself, as we can see here in this photo of two uncredited female wardrobe artists hand painting a dress for 1938's Marie Antoinette at MGM, with the only costume designer being given credit for it in the film being a man, of course, known simply by his professional name of Adrian. The fact that so many uncredited sketch artists were women, like Edith Head herself before she moved up in the ranks, together with the fact that the term wardrobe girl itself suggests that costume departments at most studios were indeed predominantly female departments, reveals the classic narrative yet again, that who is given credit has a lot more to do with who holds power in a society than who is actually doing the work. Edith Head seems to have risen to the top out of a combination of savvy and talent for getting the fan culture to be excited and getting the magazines abuzz about her designs. As she points out herself in the reading, the studios seemed to love the way that she was able to market herself and her image. But aside from Edith Head, the most prominent designers of the classical Hollywood era were all men, from her predecessors Howard Greer and Travis Banton to André Ani and the famous Russian-born French artist known professionally as Erte. These men each had large teams of both men and women working under them, with a predominance of women in the wardrobe department, for which we of course get the term wardrobe girl, who would not be credited or discussed by the filmic culture, the film's credits, or the fan culture that surrounded them, and who remain largely unknown and uncredited to this day. Speaking of uncredited costume designers, though her work was featured prominently in such famous films as 1939's Gone with the Wind and 1948's Easter Parade, a film whose centerpiece visual extravaganza surrounds the hats worn by the main characters, Mildred Blount, perhaps the most significant milliner, or ladies' hat maker for those not in the know, in Hollywood history, was never credited for her significant and iconic work, unlike Edith Head, likely because she was a black woman. Mildred Blount was the first African-American member of the Motion Picture Costumers Union, and was so popular among the stars of Hollywood that she was often hired by female stars to design their hats and personal wardrobe just for everyday wear, even outside of filmmaking. Unfortunately, relatively little information is available about her, at the present moment anyway, but it's my hope that she'll someday be as well known and celebrated as Edith Head is for her significant contributions to film history and real-world fashion as well. In the meantime, let's take a look at some of the work of Mildred Blount right now.
India Wills. What a lovely dress.
Lovely. Just can't take my eyes off it.
I'll talk to Mother. Good morning, Miss Scarlett. You look quite fine this morning, Miss Scarlett.
You?
Good morning, Miss Scarlett.
Good morning.
Nice to see you,
Good
Miss
morning.
Scarlett. Howdy, Miss Scarlett.
Yeah, but you haven't told me a thing about yourself.
I'm just a fella with an umbrella, looking for a girl who saved her love for a rainy day. I'm just a fella with an umbrella, glad to see the skies of blue have turned into skies of gray.
Taking the blues away, unhappy news away.
I'm stepping out with my baby. Can't go wrong, 'cause I'm in right. It's for sure, not for maybe, that I'm all dressed up tonight.
All night long he calls her Snooky-ookums, Snooky-ookums.
Fiddle up on your violin, lay right on it, rest your chin upon it. Doggone, you better begin and play an overture upon your violin.
When the midnight choo-choo leaves for Alabama.
Alabama.
I'm just a fella with an umbrella.
It only happens when I dance with you. That trip to heaven till the dance is through.
A girl I love is on a magazine cover.
Now, Popping over from the world of costume design back to the fields of hair and makeup, perhaps the first really significant female makeup artist was Dottie Ponadel. That's right, I said makeup artist, a vocabulary term. So, a makeup artist is, of course, the person who applies makeup and cosmetics to actors, extras, and other such performers in a film. The person who actually puts it on the actors, etc. Makeup artists in Hollywood often double as hairdressers. Not always, but usually when people go to school for being a makeup artist, they also teach you hair. Sometimes people will be separately credited as makeup artist or hairdresser, but these jobs overlap and are often done by the same sorts of technicians, shall we say. Basically, this has been done historically, and sometimes there's like a separate hair person or a separate hair department. It's a case-by-case thing, depends on the film, depends on the hair. Anyway, as I said, the first really significant female makeup artist who was not an actress applying her own makeup in the early silent era was Dottie Ponadel. This from her IMDb page. Dorothy Dottie Ponadel came to Los Angeles from Chicago in 1920 and quickly found herself cast as an extra in silent movies. She progressed to dancing roles and sidekick roles throughout the 1920s. By a turn of fate, she started her makeup career in 1930 with Follow Through, starring Nancy Carroll and Jack Haley. She quickly rose to the top, becoming the very first woman admitted into the makeup union at the specific behest of stars such as Marlene Dietrich and Mae West, both of whom were good friends and loyal clients of Dot's. Dot was kept very busy working with such stars as the aforementioned Dietrich and West, as well as Carole Lombard, Jean Arthur, Barbara Stanwyck, Helen Hayes, Paulette Goddard, Lillian Roth, Clara Bow, Joan Blondell, and many others. In 1940, she left Paramount to go to MGM at the request of Jack Dawn. While there, she was introduced to a young Judy Garland and asked to see what you can do with her. The rest, as they say, is history. Dot and Judy quickly became close friends, and Dot worked exclusively with Judy throughout her MGM career and beyond. And that is the end of the quote. Yes, for those of you who don't know, Judy Garland, I really feel terrible for her because I think she's a beautiful woman, but was, really constantly harassed by the studio higher-ups for not being pretty enough, and had serious self-esteem issues because of it. They really kind of ruined her life with this, unfortunately, but Dottie Ponadel, that's why the quote is, see what you can do with her, like they were throwing this impossible ugly duckling to, someone who could really make her come alive on screen. Anyway, to showcase the work of Dottie Ponadel, let's take a look at 1930s Follow Through, the pre-code talkie film in color through which she started her mainstream filmic career, followed by 1944's Meet Me in St. Louis, for which she was a lead makeup artist, of course, on Judy Garland, though she went uncredited for this film, of course, the makeup being credited only to her male associate, Jack Dawn. And wrapping it up with perhaps her most famous work, 1952's Singin' in the Rain, for which she, and also hairstylists Martha Acker and Helen Parsons, among others, all went uncredited for their work, so that a male could be credited instead. Let's watch.
Where have you been? I've been looking through the book of rules to see if it says anything against coughing. That Van Horn dame coughed every time you started to drive.
Well, maybe she has a cold.
Yeah, very convenient one. The coughs came in the right spots for her.
Angie, the way you glared at her, I thought any minute you'd hit her with a mashie.
Well, wouldn't that be the right club?
Oh, isn't there anything else in life but golf?
Sure, tennis.
No, I don't mean that. I mean romance.
Oh, that. You see this ring?
Why, that's a man's ring. Where did you get it?
From a drunk at a masquerade. He proposed to me, gave me the ring, and I've never seen him since.
He, gave it to you?
Well, I got it anyhow. Gee, it was fun.
Oh, Angie, I want fun, too. You know what my life has been. In bed with the chickens and up with them. Eat this, don't eat that. Oh, don't drink coffee. It'll make you nervous. Don't dance, it'll tire you. Angie, I want to dance all night long. And in between dances, I want to sit in the moonlight and have somebody whisper beautiful lies into my ear.
Then came the dawn.
Oh, Angie, I don't know what's the matter with me.
I do. His name's Jerry Downs. He's a great golf pro. He's 26, and he isn't married.
Gosh, Angie, maybe golf isn't such a bad game after all.
Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell. Sing, sing, sing went my heartstrings as we started for Huntington Dell. Chug, chug, chug went the motor. Bump, bump, bump went the brake. Thump, thump, thump went my heartstrings as we glided for Huntington Dell. The day was bright, the air was sweet. The smell of honeysuckle charmed me off my feet. I tried to sing, but couldn't squeak. In fact, I felt so good I couldn't even speak. Buzz, buzz, buzz went the buzzer. Time to all disembark. Time to fall went my heartstrings as we got off at Huntington Park. As we got off at Huntington Park.
My high starch collar and my high top shoes and my hair piled high up on my head, I went to lose a jolly hour on the trolley and lost my heart instead. With his light brown derby and his bright green tie, he was quite the handsomest of men. I started to yen, so I counted to 10, then I counted to 10 again. Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell. Zing, zing, zing went my heartstrings. From the moment I saw him, I fell. Chug, chug, chug went the motor. Bump, bump, bump went the brake. Thump, thump, thump went my heartstrings. When he smiled, I could feel the car shake. He tipped his hat and took the seat. He said he hoped he hadn't stepped upon my feet. He asked my name, I held my breath. I couldn't speak because he scared me half to death. Hey, Johnny! Chug, chug, chug went the motor. Plop, plop, plop went the wheels. Stop, stop, stop went my heartstrings. As he started to go, then I started to know how it feels when the universe reels.
The day was bright, the air was sweet. The smell of honeysuckle charmed you off your feet. You tried to sing, but couldn't squeak. In fact, you loved him so you couldn't even speak.
Buzz, buzz, buzz went the buzzer. Plop, plop, plop went the wheels. Stop, stop, stop went my heartstrings. Started to leave, I took hold of his sleeve with my hand, and as if it were planned, he stayed on with me, and it was grand just to stand with his hand holding mine to the end of the line. When my heart
glorious feeling, we're happy again. We'll walk down the lane with a happy refrain.
rain. And singing, just singing in the rain.
Hold it, Dexter! Well, Mr. Simpson, we're really rolling.
Yeah, well, you can stop rolling at once.
Huh?
Don, Lena.
All right, everybody, save it!
Save it. Tell them to go home. We're shutting down for a few weeks.
What?
Well, don't just stand there. Tell them.
Everybody go home until further notice. What is this? Yeah, what's the matter, R.F.?
The jazz singer. That's what's the matter. The jazz singer.
Oh, my darling little mammy, now little mammy, my little
No, this is no joke, Cosmo. It's a sensation. The public is screaming for more.
More what?
Talking pictures. Talking pictures.
Oh, it's just a freak.
Yeah, what a freak. We should have such a freak at this studio. I told you talking pictures were a menace, but no one would listen to me. Don, we're going to put our best feet forward. We're going to make the dueling cavalier into a talking picture.
Beautiful girl, you're a lovely picture. You were meant for me.
All I do is dream of you the whole night through.
You're all my lucky charms. I'm lucky Fit as a fiddle, ready for love. I can jump over the moon up above. Fit as a fiddle and ready for love. I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh.
Good morning.
Good morning. We've talked the whole night through.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Broadway rhythm, it's got me. Everybody dance. Broadway rhythm, it's got me. Everybody dance.
When I hear that happy beat, feel like dancing down the street.
The article Hollywood Heroines, the Most Influential Women in Film History by Laurel L.S. Bauer wrongly credits Dottie Ponadel as the only female makeup artist in Hollywood prior to the 1970s. While this is incorrect, it is nevertheless still true that Dottie Ponadel is perhaps one of the most well-known and highest-ranking female makeup artists in classical Hollywood prior to the 1970s. But this may be yet another case of, men in the classical Hollywood studio era being credited for the entirety of the work of the departments that they may have headed, departments that sometimes employed large numbers of women, as we saw earlier through our discussion of all the uncredited women working under sole credited male costume designers in wardrobe departments throughout the classical Hollywood studio era, and also, of course, hairstylists Martha Acker and Helen Parsons, who were not credited either. So it's really hard, unfortunately, to point to the important female hair and makeup people of classical Hollywood because they were so rarely, if ever, credited. It really requires a lot of digging. So maybe in the future, more of them will come out as scholars continue to look into this pursuit. Anyway, to further this point, Millicent Patrick, the designer of the Creature from the Black Lagoon costume, whom we will be studying more and taking a closer look at next week and also through your reading, she was also a makeup artist for 1952's Against All Flags, illustrating further that Dottie Ponadel was certainly not the only female Hollywood makeup artist prior to 1970, and, you know, although individual female makeup artists and hairstyles from this era, like we said, often went uncredited. Indeed, the only reason why we even know about Millicent Patrick's work as a makeup artist is totally just because of her more famous work on The Creature from the Black Lagoon and the fact that people have really dug deeper into her life and studied her because of it. Anyway, the reality is that women existed in these professions, though they were not often celebrated or even credited for their work. But while we're on the topic of Millicent Patrick, it should be noted that in addition to being a makeup artist for Against All Flags, she also served as a makeup designer on Captain Lightfoot and Sign of the Pagan from 1955 and 54, respectively. That's right, I said makeup designer, a vocabulary term. A makeup designer, as opposed to a makeup artist, is the person responsible for the visual appearance of any makeup worn by the actors in a given film. The makeup designer often works together with the costume designer to design a look for each actor that will visually convey the persona of the character that they are portraying. So a makeup designer is like a fashion designer in that they may not be the person who actually applies the makeup to the actor's like actual face, but of course may not be the person who styles the actor's hair themselves, very much like how the costume designer may not be the person who puts the clothes on the star, that's a dresser. But instead they're the person who comes up with the design for what the makeup and hair are supposed to look like, how it will interact with the wardrobe, and how the overall effect should best be achieved. As costumes, makeup, and special effects sometimes have a certain degree of overlap, we will be talking more about this in next week's class, so stay tuned. Now, while it remains true that the fields of hairdressing, makeup, and costume design were male-dominated throughout the classical Hollywood studio era, at least in terms of who's being given credit for the work, this began to change when that era ended and costume designers, hairdressers, and makeup artists began to be hired on a freelance basis, rather than with the pomp and circumstance of being official and consistently employed film studio staff like Edith Head was. Perhaps it's a sort of reverse trajectory of the story that we've been telling in so many filmic professions throughout this semester, where once power is no longer associated with a former high-status job, like with the fall of the studio era, and, instead of being like the staff makeup artist for Universal or MGM, you're just a freelancer. Men are much less interested in reserving these spaces as exclusively male spaces, and women are able to play the game again in much greater numbers. To illustrate this phenomenon, let's move on now into the modern era through some more recent work by a significant woman behind the camera, Christina Smith. Christina Smith is a makeup artist with over 79 credits to her name, including such works as 1991's Hook, Schindler's List, and Jurassic Park, both of the latter two being from '93, and 2003's Freaky Friday, for all of which she served as a makeup supervisor. Makeup supervisor. A makeup supervisor is the person who oversees the continuity of hair and makeup throughout the duration of a production, as well as coordinating the design, application, and storage of the makeup materials, whether that's, just cosmetics or, prosthetics that you have to stick onto a person or whatever. A makeup supervisor is crucial to making sure that the characters in a film have a consistent appearance, which obviously is a crucial part of the process that makes a filmic illusion work, a concept which we will be exploring further in a little bit, so stay tuned. So obviously, originally in early Hollywood, these jobs weren't yet differentiated. Makeup designer, makeup supervisor, and makeup artist were kind of all under the term makeup artist in the, early days of George Westmore founding this concept. But, it's since branched out and evolved, and now there's, again, kind of like with producers, there's like a hierarchy of makeup artists, there's the makeup team. Anyway, back to Christina Smith. Because they're such great movies and because her work on them is so significant, let's take a look at some of the films that Christina Smith has worked on as the sole credited makeup supervisor right now.
Anna, honey, wake up. Oh, I have had it. Hurry up!
What? I'm ready.
For the Coleman family, Mondays are manic.
Bye, honey. Make good choices.
Wednesdays are wild.
Get out of my room!
And for Anna and Tess, there's never enough time to really understand each other.
What? Time's up. It's after 6.
But on Friday...
You think my life is perfect?
You couldn't last one day in my high school.
Cookie.
That's all about to change. Because things are going to get a little freaky.
Why am I in Anna's room? This isn't mine. Those aren't mine. That's definitely not mine.
Walt Disney Pictures presents...
So, you're in my body and I'm in your body. I'm old!
I beg your pardon?
Oh, I'm like the Crypt Keeper!
Freaky Friday.
Why don't we,
Yes, a jolt!
go?
Coming soon to Disney DVD and video.
The stories are true. He's come back to seek his revenge. Only you can save your children. You must make yourself remember.
Remember what?
Peter, don't you know who you are?
Have to fly. Have to fight. Have to crow. Have to save Maggie. Have to save Jack. Okay, back. Who?
Let's fly!
Oh my God, where are we going?
To Never Never Land.
I hate Peter Pan!
Since the beginning of time, man has searched the earth for evidence of its past. But while some have looked for clues to the mystery, one man has found the way to bring the mystery back to life.
I own an island off the coast of Costa Rica, and I've spent the last 5 years setting up a kind of biological preserve.
Here, on this private island, science has defied evolution.
Where do you get 100-million-year-old dinosaur blood?
Genetics has mastered creation.
We've made living biological attractions so astounding that they'll capture the imagination of the entire planet.
And extinction is a thing of the past.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
What they got in there, King Kong?
None of these attractions are ready yet, of course, but the park will open with the basic tour you're about to take.
Hey, look at this.
You see something?
Dinosaurs and man. Two species separated by 65 million years of evolution have just been suddenly thrown back into the mix together.
Can I touch it?
Sure. How can we possibly have the slightest idea
You feel that?
what to expect?
Fences are failing all over the park.
Yeah, that's nice.
Phones are out too.
Gotta go.
Universal Pictures presents
Hey! Ian, freeze! I can't get Jurassic Park back online.
an adventure 65 million years in the making.
Oh
This is just a delay. That's all it is. All major theme parks had delays. When they opened Disneyland in 1956, nothing worked.
But John, if the Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourists.
You sure we're safe?
Yes. Unless they figure out how to open doors.
Jurassic Park.
Und in 2 Reihe abtreten!
By law, I have to tell you, sir, I'm a Jew.
Well, I'm a German. So there we are.
You want these people?
My people. I want my people.
Who are you, Moses?
They say your factory is a haven. They say you are good.
Who says that?
Everyone.
All you have to do is tell me what it's worth to you. What's a person worth?
No, 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 no. What's one worth to you?
Power is when we have every justification to kill, and we don't. The list is life. Whoever saves one life saves the world entire.
Now, moving on to our most recent example of a female makeup artist behind the camera for tonight, we have Elaine Offers, a makeup artist who worked on 2011's Green Lantern. Elaine Offers, it should be noted, did what we call the beauty makeup for Ryan Reynolds. They call it that, whether it's a man or a woman, because that's what it is. Ryan Reynolds being, of course, the star of the film Green Lantern. I want to bring up this example, this film in particular, because of how it illustrates the differences between the kinds of makeups used in mainstream film. In particular, beauty makeup versus special effects makeup. Basically, as you'll see in the clip that we're about to screen, the main human characters are generally wearing beauty makeup. That is, makeup meant to make them look more attractive without making them look as though they have been made up at all. Beauty makeup is supposed to appear basically invisible. It's supposed to present the actors as if their attractiveness is all their own, which of course it never is. Human skin looks weird and grainy on film without makeup. There's actually a famous case, the presidential debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Everyone who heard it on the radio, or at least most people who heard it on the radio, overwhelmingly reported thinking that Nixon won the debate. People who saw it on television almost unanimously felt that Kennedy won because Kennedy chose to wear makeup and Nixon refused, thinking it was unmanly. Therefore, Kennedy looked normal and attractive on television, and Nixon's skin looked horrible and strange and grainy and weird, and he just didn't present himself very well. He looked gross and untrustworthy, and, my goodness, your presidency brought to you by makeup, like, literally. This is really the power of makeup and how important it is to, not look weird on screen. Anyway, yes, you need makeup in order to appear normal on film, and the attractiveness of any given film star in any given scene is very much indebted to the work of hairdressers and makeup artists who manage the illusion of this attractiveness.
Except you, Cordelia, you look normal on film.
I'm wearing makeup. Conversely, special effects makeup is used for a wide variety of reasons, ranging from things like gore, or even mild cuts and bruises, or just face dirt to make a character look lightly battered in a fight, or whatever, to, obviously things like non-human creatures, non-human faces, which we will be seeing some examples of in the Green Lantern clip, and of course studying more about on our Women in Special Effects class next week. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of the beauty makeup of Elaine Offers and some of the special effects makeup of other artists through 2011's Green Lantern right now.
No.
Sorry, I gotta run. Make yourself at home, okay? There's water in the tap.
Hal, you're late. This test today, it's important.
I'm gonna make you look good up there, don't worry. Now let's get these pants off and fly some planes. When I'm flying, it feels like anything is possible. It's like no matter how bad things get, there's something good out there, just over the horizon. Hal Jordan.
The ring. It chose you. Use its power to defend our universe. Become one of us. Become a Green Lantern.
The ring said it was a great responsibility. Responsibility? You? Let's hope so. Anything I see in my mind, I can create. The one thing that a Green Lantern is supposed to be is fearless. That isn't me.
You had the ability to overcome fear.
Wow. I know, right? Woo!
What happens now? You go look for trouble. Brightest day, blackest night.
Speaking of women in special effects, here is the first part of your hidden assignment for tonight. I've been in touch with special effects artist puppeteer Tamara Carlson Woodard of The Mandalorian's Baby Yoda, aka The Child fame. Her credits, of course, also include things like the creation of the monkey puppet from Kubo and the Two Strings, being on the Raptor team of Jurassic Park 3, doing costume work on Paranorman, as well as special effects makeup for Captain Marvel and the last two Avengers movies, among a ton of really impressive other film credits. Anyway, if we're lucky, Tamara Carlson Woodard may make a guest appearance in our post-class Zoom meeting next week, a little earlier than usual, starting at 7:30 p.m., which will be mandatory next week for this reason. I'm telling you this now because the first part of your hidden assignment tonight is to look her up on IMDb. It's Tamara Carlson Woodard. Think about it, and email me at some point before midnight tonight with the question that you might like to ask her at next week's Zoom meeting at 7:30. I will respond and let you know before next week if your question is in the running. We will have limited time with Tamara, and I want to prioritize the best or otherwise most interesting, most useful questions. So think about it and email me your question no later than midnight tonight, and look forward to meeting one of the coolest women working in special effects next week at our Zoom meeting at 7:30 p.m. Anyway, going back to makeup artists, I wanted to raise a few points here about their importance and significance to film history and the concept of celebrity culture at large. Actors in film, even in the modern era, are defined so much by how they look. Arguably, this is as important a factor as any, sometimes a more important factor even than things like acting talent or skill when it comes to the making of a recognizable character or star. Recognition is a crucial part of what accounts for the financial incentive for and creates the very existence of celebrity status. You see a poster with your favorite actor's face on it, you're automatically more interested in seeing that movie, whether you've even read the title yet or not. It's just basically Hollywood has your money, simple as that. In fact, it goes beyond just the face, it's also the name. When you have a celebrity like, say, Scarlett Johansson, even in mundane circumstances, they can totally draw a disproportionate amount of attention away from the matter at hand. Like, a semester or two ago, I had a midterm question. It was an open-ended question. You got to pick one of 5 questions to do an essay on. One of these 5 questions happened to contain the words Scarlett Johansson. It mentioned somebody's name that was super recognizable to, like, the class, and everyone in the class, except for one person, did the Scarlett Johansson question. Not because it was a better question, it definitely wasn't the best question on that list. It was just that her star appeal, her star pull, the recognition, actually even worked on a midterm test. So basically, recognition of face and name are really what celebrity culture is all about. But when you see a celebrity in the wild, you often don't immediately recognize them, and they often look surprisingly worse than you would expect. So I live in Montclair, New Jersey. Stephen Colbert lives right on the other side of the tracks from me in, one of the big nice houses. I'm like immediately, they're just like a few blocks away, like really, really close. So you see Stephen Colbert when you live in this town frequently. Like if you're at the supermarket or, at a local restaurant, everyone has their Stephen Colbert sightings. The first time that I saw him in the wild, the first time that I got mine, it was right after college. I was working at the local Mexican restaurant, and I kept noticing this guy who was eating some chicken wings in the corner, and I was like, gee, that guy's familiar. And I thought, you know who he looks like? He looks like an older, much less attractive Stephen Colbert. And then I thought, oh, that's Stephen Colbert out of makeup. and I like, poked my coworkers, and I wrote like Stephen Colbert, and they were like, yeah, and I was like, oh, okay. And after you see him the first time, then you recognize him. Basically, this is basically the importance of hair and makeup. It's like Stephen Colbert looks so much younger, so much more attractive when he's, done than he does in the wild, to the point at which when he was doing his own, quarantine videos from his house, he actually made a point of explaining right from the get-go that he was using his wife's makeup kit to appear normal on, camera, even for a remote from home broadcast. Again, human skin looks weird on film. Makeup helps create the recognizable celebrity image. So this is the power of makeup artists, hairdressers, costumers, and other such cosmetic professionals who tailor make the look of a given celebrity's recognizable image. In fact, so much so that the actor Robert Pattinson, when he was first being brought by Catherine Hardwicke to meet the producers after he had been cast in Twilight, he showed up on a shaggy day. He had dyed his hair weird colors, he was just grungy, dressed in like a hoodie, and had like stubble and everything. And the producers, as soon as he left, like rebelled. They totally balked. They're like, you cannot cast this grungy, gross guy as your male lead in a romance movie. And Catherine Hardwicke had to calm them down and convince them to give him a second chance, shaved and in better clothing, and the rest is history. You can really easily make someone's physical appearance look bad, and this is part of what makes celebrities such a unique case. It's the recognition. You can even make the same celebrity not look like themselves. Anyway, so in film, obviously, physical appearance is a huge part of the game for actors in particular, and having a particularly recognizable appearance is a huge part of celebrity. This is part of why throughout classical Hollywood studio, throughout the classical Hollywood studio era, that is, and to a lesser degree even afterwards, even today, actors, were kind of branded in a way that sort of caricatured them with hair and makeup. Whether we're talking about classic things like Charlie Chaplin's iconic tramp character, Greta Garbo's pencil-thin eyebrows, Veronica Lake's face-covering blonde hair, Douglas Fairbanks's, pencil-thin mustache, or Marilyn Monroe's beauty mark. Even today, though to a lesser degree, movie stars still have certain, often cosmetically enhanced things about them that make them immediately recognizable, their trademark, like Robert Pattinson's accentuated hollow cheekbones, Scarlett Johansson's tied-back blonde hair, Robert Downey Jr.'s little Sheriff of Nottingham beard-mustache combo, Emma Stone's bold lipstick, Leonardo DiCaprio's swept-back hairstyles. These, consistent looks that help your brain latch onto the face. In fact, I think modern star images seem to be disproportionately defined by hairstyles than by the more iconic facial makeups used by stars in the past. Maybe this is just, an evolution of style towards a more, understated, though no less branded, iconic, recognizable look. Anyway, recognition, like I said, is the basis of celebrity branding, and hence the business of movie stars in general. You could make any star look totally unrecognizable with the right costuming and makeup, like with Daniel Craig's cameo as a stormtrooper in Star Wars The Force Awakens, for example. And it would result in the predictable outcome of no one being particularly excited to see them in the role, like with Daniel Craig's cameo as a stormtrooper in Star Wars The Force Awakens, for example, before it was revealed in fan publications that that's who was in the costume. Since Hollywood is, again, primarily a business, it makes perfect financial sense for the priority to be placed on hair, makeup, and wardrobe that makes a star recognizable, even in cases where the person being recognized isn't actually the star. What, you may be asking? And you'd be right. But the truth about hairdressing, makeup, and wardrobe is that they are, often made to come together to make people other than the star look interchangeable with the star for a wide variety of purposes. To help illustrate what I mean by this, let's turn our attention now to Bernadine Anderson, a woman behind the camera who is noted for another reason, specifically for being the first black female makeup artist in Hollywood, and who happens to also be the first female makeup artist of any race to break into the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, as well as Makeup and Hair Artists Local 706, the film industry hair and makeup artists union of the present era, in addition, of course, to her significant work in film. Bernadine Anderson worked as a makeup artist on the acclaimed 1977 TV miniseries Roots, several Eddie Murphy movies throughout the 80s and 90s, including 1988's Coming to America, 1990's Another 48 Hours, and 1992's Boomerang, in addition to being actress Jane Fonda's longtime personal makeup artist throughout the 1970s by special request of Jane Fonda herself. This request on Jane Fonda's part is really what helped Bernadine Anderson get into the mainstream as the first black female makeup artist, I should add, in post-studio era Hollywood, as the, black actors in early silent films like those of Tracy Saunders and Maria P. Williams would, of course, have probably been doing their own makeup as well, just like their white counterparts in the early silent era. This sort of friendship / business relationship between Jane Fonda and Bernadine Anderson stands, as perhaps yet another instance of female friendships helping to empower more women in the film industry, in this case enabling the first black woman to enter this particular aspect of mainstream film in the modern era, and thus paving the way for others who have since followed in her footsteps. Let's take a look at some examples of the filmic work of Bernadine Anderson, followed by a clip from the Smithsonian interview with her about her filmic experience right now.
Kunta Kinte, are you to be a child forever? Were you not sent to catch a bird? Did you forget the instructions given you?
I did not forget.
Then you decided it would be better to disobey those instructions and...
I saw white men.
What did you say?
I said I saw white men.
For the rest of your lives, even when you have come to be men, you must be on guard against the white Toubab and the black traders who helped them. These things I'm going to tell you now you must hear with more than your ears. For not to do as I say can mean you're being stolen away to a place outside our world, outside of us, forever. Never be alone when you can help it. Never be out at night when you can help it. And day or night, if you are alone, keep away from any high weeds or bushes. And if ever you see much smoke away from any village, it is probably the white man's cooking fires, which are always too big. And remember, when you are close to where he has been, his scent remains in the air. It is a smell like a wet chicken. And most importantly, remember that Kunta Kinte saw the white man less than 2 days' walk from where we are now. The white man is here.
The China Syndrome. It's about people who lie, and people faced with the agony of telling the truth.
Right.
People like Kimberly Wells, a television reporter paid to smile, not to think.
A few words about a veterinarian who makes house calls on sick fish. Or is it aquarium calls?
Richard Adams, a cameraman who never learned how to play by the rules.
Wait till you get in that other room, get that radiation all over that cute little body.
Jack Goodell, an engineer who knows too much to tell the truth.
In anything that man ever does, there's some element of risk, right? Well, that's why we have what we call defense in depth.
And cares too much to lie.
No accident.
It will start with a tremor in a nuclear power plant. Where it will end will depend on 3 people.
I would say you're probably lucky to be alive. Same for the rest of Southern California.
Jane Fonda.
Let's face it, you didn't get this job because of your investigative abilities. Kimberly, don't fight it.
Jack Lemmon.
There was a vibration.
Michael Douglas.
I don't know that accident is the right word.
Accident is the right word.
The China Syndrome. The harder they try, the more resistance they meet.
They've got their own security man. Do you hear what I'm saying? Do you want me to make it any clearer?
The closer they get, the more threatening it becomes. The China Syndrome. Today, only a handful of people know what it really means. And they're scared.
Everybody keep your station! Everybody keep your station!
Soon, you will know. The China Syndrome.
Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, lived a handsome prince. He was attended by devoted servants.
Do you think perhaps just once I might use the bathroom by myself?
Notes to music, sir.
Wipers!
And engaged by royal decree.
Why? Why can't I find my own wife?
We've gone to a great deal of trouble to select for you a very fine wife.
I want a woman that's going to arouse my intellect as well as my loins.
Where will you find such a woman?
In America.
So he traveled across the sea to the land of opportunity, which is where the fairy tale ends and our story begins.
Behold, Simi, life, real life, a thing that we have been denied for far too long. We're in New York now. Let us dress as New Yorkers. I feel like a complete idiot.
Have either of you ever had any fast food work experience before?
Certainly not. This will be our first job in the United States. I am Akeem.
It's nice to meet you, Akeem.
I have recently been placed in charge of garbage.
That's good to know.
Oh my goodness, it is you! Greetings, Your Highness.
Who was that?
Eddie Murphy.
Just the man I met in the restroom.
Arsenio Hall. In a comedy fable of royal romance.
When I look at these contestants for the Miss Black Awareness pageant, I feel good.
Apparently, these are the best women Queens has to offer. Pick one and let's go home.
I want to tear you apart. And your friend, too.
Coming to America.
Sir, I was wondering, did you happen to catch the professional football contest on television last night?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was most exhilarating. The Giants of New York took on the Packers of Green Bay. And in the end, the Giants triumphed by kicking an oblong ball made of pigskin to a big H. It was a most ripping victory.
Son, you want to keep working here. Stay off the drugs.
You don't know what you do to me. Want to kiss myself? God, and I got the feeling. Hey!
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3.
It's been 7 long years.
Look, I got 48 hours to bring this guy in. I'm history.
You want me to go out with you for another 48 hours?
Now look, Reggie, this time I promise you it's gonna be different.
But Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte are back.
Let me tell you something. I ain't working for you, I don't like you, and I don't trust you.
Welcome back, Reg.
And they're making up for lost time.
You got the same car, same clothes.
That's the way I like it. I get attached to things, Reggie.
Another 48 hours.
Oh, you're in trouble with the law this time. Good.
Eddie Murphy, Nick Nolte.
I'm driving.
I was wanting a chauffeur, Reggie.
Another 48 hours.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on a red light.
Yes, baby. I'll give you $20 for that leash.
Kirby! Come on, Kirby! Kirby!
Did you lose your dog?
Oh, yeah, I lost a white Springer Spaniel with brown spots on him named Kirby.
You ain't got no romance.
Excuse me. I am the most romantic cat both of you know.
Wait, let me give you my number, because I'm not going to be able to sleep until I know you found him. Do you have a pen?
Do I?
Man, stuff like that never happens to me. Man, stuff like that never happens to anybody except for Marcus.
Spend the night with me.
Oh, Christy, no, it's just too soon. The only reason stuff like that happens to me all the time is because I pay attention to women. Check it. It's like Jet Magazine.
I've been working here about 9 days. You know, I've been on time most of the time, even when it rains. Don't you think it's about time we talk promotion?
We're colleagues. We can discuss business.
Marcus.
I'm talking about a business dinner. Just business and straight and discussing our work.
You know, there's other things in life besides sex. Come on, how about sharing, commitment? You know, you get to get in touch with your feminine side like me.
Starting to sound a little on the soft side.
I'm trying to impress you, you know that.
I know it. Now, where'd you get the mushroom shirt? I got to know.
Well, the secret is you got to coordinate. Most people don't coordinate. So you got to coordinate. Look what I got.
Stop!
Like, haven't you ever seen a guy and thought he was attractive?
Women do stuff like that. You see other girls and you say, oh, she's cute or her hair is nice. But guys don't see other guys and go, oh, look at his shoulders. We don't do that.
Now, you know what your problem is? You need more romance and less dopamine pincher. That's what you need.
Oh, God. I am Mr. Romance when I meet a woman, and then once I hit it, I lose interest, but that ain't my fault. Where you going?
I have to give a speech in the morning to the board of directors. But thank you. You were great.
Love is like a...
God, Marcus, I was so tense when I got off the plane, but you really relaxed me.
Call me.
Sad, man. First the Fat Boys break up, now this.
this is Dwan Race from the Smithsonian, and I'm sitting here today with Ms. Bernadine Anderson.
Hi.
Welcome.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're joining this group here that we're meeting in Las Vegas, and I hear you have an interesting story to tell.
I do, and it's a little bit different. I'm the first woman, black woman, to break Local 706, which is Makeup and Hairstylist Local. And I had to file a class act suit to do this because they just wouldn't let minorities in. And it was a very hard industry to break. No matter how hard you tried, you just couldn't break it. But I was blessed enough to get an apprenticeship at Warner Brothers. And I was the last person to be trained at Warner Brothers. So I felt very blessed. I did 3 years of apprenticeship at Warner Brothers. And the Stuntmen Association that we're talking about today, I used to make them look like the actors.
So tell me, this is all coinciding around the same time in the 60s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I did a lot of films, but I was a very blessed person to have someone request me, which was Jane Fonda, during a period where black folks didn't work on white films. I was her makeup artist for 8 years.
Okay.
And I did all the stuff that she did in the early 70s. And then she took a break. And then I went with other actors. I have other actors that I worked with for long periods of time. I worked with Eddie Murphy for 8 years. And when you work with actors, you do their doubles, you do their triples. You know, you make everybody that has to look like them look exactly like them, color-wise, figure-wise. You just make them look like they're doubles or they're triples, because they have done triples on people.
Explain what a triple is.
A triple is the third person down. He does falls and things that the double can't do. He picks up where the double doesn't do it anymore, and then the triple does it. So we've had triples, we've had quadruples.
Okay.
You know, I mean, some people are not stunt drivers. So you have to get another person to do the stunt driving, and you have to make them look like the actor, unless the actor wants to do it. You know, and I must say that a lot of actors do want to do their own stunts. They're very adventurous, but there's a lot of stuff they can't do because they don't know the secrets. So.
Bernadine Anderson's points here about actors being doubled, tripled, and quadrupled is very well taken. Any given performance of a character in a film involves the work of a small crowd of people, not just the actor-director duo who are so often given exclusive credit for creating a character and a performance in a film. Doubles will double, whether for physical stunts, automotive stunt driving, or even just simple reverse shot stand-ins while the star is filming other scenes elsewhere at the same time, meaning that every filmic character, from Jack Sparrow to Wonder Woman to Indiana Jones, is actually made up of pieces of multiple different people's performances, all working together to lend their various skills towards the making of an exaggerated, larger-than-life person who comes alive on the screen. Not just the doubles, of course, but the hairdressers, makeup artists, costumers, lighting technicians, cinematographers, camera operators, editors, and all other kinds of behind-the-scenes people, work together to make this illusion possible, to make it look convincingly like the same person on screen. Similar, I think, to the ways of historic folk heroes, from Hercules to Beowulf to Robin Hood, characters made up from the combined exaggerated exploits of various different historical people all rolled into one fictional person, so too do movie heroes owe their existence to the skills and exploits of a wide array of different people with a different set of skills. This helps account in part for how and why film characters are able to successfully create the illusion of being larger than life, and emphasizes the importance of hair, makeup, and costuming towards creating the illusion that all these heroic feats belong to the same single person. Without these roles being served to an expert degree, it would be painfully obvious when an actor suddenly transforms into their stunt double, as is often the case on low-budget productions without expert makeup artists like Bernadine Anderson transforming the doubles, triples, and quadruples into, their starring doppelgangers so seamlessly. I hope you can appreciate that part of why movies have such fluidity, why you almost never notice the swapping out of doubles for the stars, why you are never allowed to see the jarring seams of this illusion break down, is because of the expert work of hairdressers, costumers, and makeup artists throughout the film industry. Going back to Bernadine Anderson in particular, part of her significance as a makeup artist comes from the fact that, traditionally, professionally trained makeup artists who worked in Hollywood were exclusively taught to do makeup for white actors. It makes sense that Anderson, as a black woman, would have been in a unique position to lend her skills to productions starring black actors like Eddie Murphy and LeVar Burton, in a Hollywood where the majority of working makeup artists would have had little to no formal training or experience with makeup for non-white faces. An NBC News article I found from last year entitled "How Hollywood's Diversity Push is Also Changing the Makeup Industry" discusses this issue in depth, beginning with an exploration of the experience of makeup artist Tim Buchrarin, saying, "When he started attending makeup school, he took a course with two major makeup artists in Hollywood and asked if he and other students would be learning how to apply makeup on women of color. Buchrarin said that they told him they wouldn't because 90% of their careers would be spent working with white actors. That was very shocking to me, especially at a place that you're supposed to be learning," he said. The quote continues, "With more than 80 credits to his name, Buchrarin has found that hasn't been the case. He's done makeup for Janet Jackson and worked as makeup department head for the 2006 Academy Award-winning film Dreamgirls. His projects last year included American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace, and Black Panther. But even with Hollywood working on diversity, the makeup industry, he said, still has some catching up to do. Just because they have an Asian, Latino, or African American face on the poster, when you get to the counter, the products that represent those people are not there or are not easily accessible," he said. The article goes on to state, but makeup brands are not the only ones at fault, according to celebrity photographer Alexei Lubomirsky. Some magazines and advertising companies use effects to lighten an image's subject, Lubomirsky said, something he hadn't been fully aware of until working with Academy Award winner Lupita Nyong'o for a Le Comme advertisement in 2014. Lubomirsky said that after the shoot, Nyong'o specifically requested that her skin not be altered in post-production, as had been done in previous shoots. That's the end of the quote. So, unfortunately, as you can see, there remains a certain, shall we say, racism, and perhaps also colorism, built into the assumptions of the cosmetics industry both in and outside of Hollywood. This is, of course, as systematic and institutionalized as the sexism that we've noted throughout the history of the film industry, if not actually much worse, and exists at basically every level of filmmaking in far more departments than simply hair and makeup. Indeed, though we haven't really delved into a lot of women of color yet this semester outside of our initial exploration of female silent film directors, and though we will be looking at more minority women filmmakers in various capacities and various roles later on in the semester, the relative dearth of women of color that we have been looking at so far throughout the history of so many different filmic professions illustrates the problematic history of how Hollywood has historically excluded people of color from so many roles, basically every role, both behind and in front of the camera, and continues to do so to the present day, though admittedly to a much lesser degree. While more effort obviously now is being made to remedy this than perhaps ever before in film history, and while there is hope for some improvement on the horizon, the problem remains for the time being, and it is really only the result of grassroots pressure coming from the internet, where historically disenfranchised voices are given a new platform for mass media communication via this, user enfranchising new technology. It's only because of that this is beginning to change. Again, like we said, the arc of the moral universe only bends towards justice if we, the people, choose to bend it that way. Things don't magically get better by themselves just because time marches on, and we will only have the opportunity to bend this arc further towards justice if our access to mass communication platforms like the internet remains free and uninhibited, and doesn't end up becoming controlled by the conservative forces that threaten it as we speak, the modern-day parallel, perhaps, to the perpetuators of the soft purge. But perhaps there's some hope to be had after all. According to our usual statistics site, womenandhollywood.com, of the top 300 films from 2016 to 2018, get this, 78.5% of all hair department heads were women, and 21.5% were men. 76.4% of makeup department heads were women, and 23.6% were men. There were 275 individuals credited as costume designers, 15.6% were male, and 84.4% were female. This illustrates some clear and obvious progress since the days of the classical Hollywood studio era, in which hair, makeup, and costume departments were all controlled by men, who often got sole credits at the expense of all of the other people who worked in their departments. Obviously, these are still not technically gender-balanced professions. Obviously, the goal would be to have a 50-50 split if you really want gender balance, but these are now overwhelmingly female professions where they had once been overwhelmingly male, at least in terms of leadership positions, pay scale and credits, which illustrates that these professions now actually favor women and perhaps disfavor men. I think this is the first profession in Hollywood that we are seeing have this trajectory, have it become now majority female. I think that we have not yet encountered that this semester, so here we go. This phenomenon, however, may again reflect the fact that since the end of the Hollywood studio era, starting in the late 1940s, hairdressers, makeup artists, and costume designers are generally hired now on a freelance basis, meaning that they do not command the kind of status and power that they once did under the Hollywood studio system. This might be part of why so many women seem to have been able to break into these professions, and make them into now female-dominated fields, as they have become. But again, even in spite of this perhaps somewhat backhanded sort of progress, these professions still remain predominantly white, despite becoming more female-friendly. As womenandhollywood.com notes, only 14% of costume designers in the top 300 films of 2016 to 2018, where these stats are coming from, only 14% were from diverse racial/ethnic groups. 73.2% were white females. 12.9% were white males. 11% diverse females, and 2.9% diverse males. And that's the end of the quote. This illustrates, perhaps, the progress we have yet to make, and challenges us to make the makeup, hairdressing, and costuming industries more open and friendly to women and men of color. So take that arc of the moral universe and bend it towards justice by complaining on the internet whenever you see Hollywood fail. Believe it or not, this does actually help. Speaking of these topics, I must salute you all, by the way, for having finished your midterm projects. I know I'm late, but salute, congratulations. They were all, for the most part, very good, and a few of your videos actually taught me a thing or two about women behind the camera whom I was not already aware of. The women that I had not known about and learned the most about from this class were, I must note, disproportionately black women. And hence, I think this illustrates the kinds of issues that we've been talking about here, and about which we read last week in the article on female composers. The reality that when you don't celebrate the achievements of certain types of people, either in textbooks or in the mainstream culture, that prevents people who look like them from hearing their stories and being inspired. It also prevents people who look different from them from realizing the importance of their contributions and from recognizing their potential as prospective employees in a hiring situation, since the power holders in the film industry, as with many, many industries today, unfortunately, are still predominantly white, and that's part of how this exclusion of people of color gets perpetuated. The film history that I was taught in my time at NYU was predominantly white and exclusively male. I was in the master's degree program the year that they discovered the big news about Alice Guy Blaché. I was in one of the last undergraduate film classes that was taught an all-male, all-white history of cinema. As a result of this, I realized the flaws in my own teaching narratives, the ones that I am passing down to you now, based on what I learned in my own admittedly inadequate and unfortunately stilted classes at NYU a decade ago. Some of the NYU professors, to be fair, made a huge effort to teach us about women in early film, and to an unfortunately lesser degree minorities as well. And perhaps I expect they've since improved their narratives. Again, I was in the master's program 10 years ago. Hopefully they've improved upon this questionable historiography. These histories that were intentionally written to exclude mention of women and minorities, to gloss over their contributions, or to omit them entirely. Considering the relative dearth of examples of non-white creators in our studies here, it seems clear that I, as perhaps most cinema studies professors throughout history, have inherited biased narratives that I discover now myself perpetuating. And it was thanks to some of your midterm projects that I came to realize this. So I really have to thank those of you who did projects on women, and especially minority women, of whom I was not already aware, for bringing them to my attention and enhancing this class and helping to correct its biases for students who may take it in the future. I will be making, as I have let some of you know, a compilation video of some of the, most useful, informative, and otherwise interesting midterm project videos in this class. And I'm still in the process of reaching out to everyone individually for permission to use them. So if you haven't heard from me yet and would like your midterm video project to be shared with the rest of the class at the end of the semester, please email me and let me know. Additionally, we have our penultimate class on November 10th, at which I will be showcasing more minority women and bringing a lot more women of color, both ones that I learned about from your midterm projects and ones that I found through my own research, to your attention, so stay tuned for that. I realize now that more of them should have been better integrated into earlier lessons, though the vast majority of them do seem to be directors, and the fact remains that where women of color existed in the past eras of filmic history, they existed not only in much smaller numbers, but remain harder to dig up information on than their white counterparts, due to the double whammy of sexism and racism that has contributed to their historical erasure by historians, usually white male historians, who, often leave them out of the account of their, earliest foundational filmic narratives that form the basis of our current cinema studies texts and histories. The bottom line is, I'm still learning too. And I'm trying my best to recognize and correct the inaccuracies, omissions, and unfair biases that were intrinsically woven into my own education. And I apologize to you, really, for the failings of what I have been, and unfortunately continue to perhaps be perpetuating and passing on thoughtlessly throughout this semester. I will make a better effort to dig deeper, look harder, and bring more women of color to the forefront of our discussions from here on out. And in cases where I can't find any, I will invite you to suggest any that you may know of, or, hold it up as a real illustration of the ways in which women of color have either been A, more effectively erased where they existed, and B, so completely excluded from certain professions that the failings of the institutions that perpetuate these exclusions speak for themselves. As for myself, I plan to do my small part towards bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice, and hope that you will do the same. To that end, the second and final part of your hidden assignment tonight is this. In anticipation of next week's class, let me know if you know of any significant women of color who have worked in the special effects industry in film. If you don't know any, that's fine. Just email me either way, letting me know, or include it in your original hidden assignment message to me if you just want to send one email to be efficient with the previous thing and this together, that's fine. Just let me know if there's a woman of color in special effects that you know about from any time in film history that you want to make sure that we don't omit or overlook in next week's class. That's all for now. Again, congratulations on having done such a great batch of midterm videos. In general, this class did very well on the midterm and taught me a whole lot, and for that I deeply thank you. I won't forget what I've learned, and I hope that you won't either. Remember, next week, the post-class Zoom meeting will be mandatory and will begin at 7:30 because of special guest star Tamara Carlson Woodard of Baby Yoda fame. So make me proud and don't forget to show up. Till then, this is Professor Saporin, signing off.
Dancing and singing in